just an old New York City elevated car. Weather-beaten, brow-beaten, just plain beaten. Oh, I'm by no means alone in the world. Quite a few of my kin have escaped the Kinnan pile, up to now. But all signs point to our days being numbered. The 3rd Avenue branch is the last remaining limb of my family tree. I remember how, when a youngster, we did our family chores with wood-burning engines. But soon we were taught that if we were to grow into a good, healthy system, we'd have to lead a cleaner life. So they shot us full of electricity, and we grew and grew until our structures became the transportation backbone of the largest city in the world. Our gable stations were a new high in architectural achievement when built. All went well until the 1930s, when we noticed that subways were undermining our security. When we failed to carry our customary total of 1 million passengers a day, zip, the props were pulled out from under us. Acetylene torches did the rest. A horrible, horrible death for the poor old 2nd, 6th, and 9th Avenue branches. Our terrific noise, if you ask me, is one big reason for our downfall. But can we help it if the canyons of buildings we run through kick our sound around? Few folks realize that we have our quieter side. Why, one of our spurs mingles with the stately trees and fragrant flowers of the Bronx Park. Take a run downtown now. If you stay with me, I can show you a New York City no other means of transportation can. From my windows, you will get glimpses of the most famous buildings in the world. From my windows, well, just wait. We have to pass through the dense Bronx tenement district before coming to Manhattan. It's an overall trip of 15 miles to South Ferry. From there, you'll be able to see the Statue of Liberty. This stretch, sandwiched between the tenements, I always call Clothesline Alley. In a sense, it's my gateway to Manhattan. For outside it, just around this big curve, we cross the Harlem River, which separates the Bronx from Manhattan. Here, under my bridge, is where East Side kids swim. Straight as a die now, down 3rd Avenue toward Midtown. Out of my windows along the way, I'm much too often reminded of my fate. Whole blocks of old New York being turned under to make way for the new. Even though the 3rd Avenue is the last of the L's, there are still over 1,000 people employed in operating us, and we carry 270,000 passengers a day. Kind of a melting pot on wheels, I am. I carry the old and the young, the dignified and the not so dignified. The pious and the hopeless. The towers of the Waldorf Astoria, where millionaires and visiting royalty stay, tell my passengers that we have reached Midtown Manhattan. The Chrysler Building, Grand Central Terminal, the Empire State Building, all in sight from my trembling station, which stands in the middle of famed 42nd Street. With the swirling activity of Midtown behind us, we now proceed south to Brooklyn Bridge and the Lower East Side made famous in song. The New York of the Smiths, the Cantors, Jessels, Winchells, the Rooneys, and the O'Grady's. The mysteries of the Bowery and Chinatown are ever present under my rails. In Chinatown's Chatham Square, our route divides itself. The train to the left is ours, proceeding to South Ferry, as I promised you we would. The other is on its way to our City Hall terminal, neighboring the Woolworth building. On we go, our route becoming ever narrower, like a mountain stream, cutting its way through a deep, booming gorge. We cross Wall Street and arrive at the little station where many a banker has paused to rub his palms, not in anticipation of the day's financial gains, but to warm his hands over the friendly, pot-bellied stove. Finally, our route swings out into the comparative open, and from my windows, the confining walls of skyscrapers give way to the maritime scene in New York Bay. South Ferry, where all the L's used to terminate, passengers transferring to Staten Island ferry boats or for the Statue of Liberty. To a lot of people, I mean a lot of things. One sightseeing guide often refers to my structure as the eighth wonder of the world. During L construction in the 1870s, the big wonder used to be how we'd keep from toppling into the street.
From pole to pole and sea to sea, the disc symbolized the size and importance of the Western Hemisphere's greatest metropolis. Business and shopping streets reflect the prosperity of the city, as do the broad avenues lined with tall apartment houses and great hotels. New York is a city of people, and Grand Central Station, or one of the other railroad terminals that serve the city. Visitors who come by air or sea, or by automobile, from every corner of America and the world. Visitors discover in New York a city of contrast, a city where the new and the old live gracefully, side by side. A modern apartment high, while at its base stand quaint and picturesque homes of another century. This charming street is in New York's renowned Greenwich Village, long the favored residence of writers and artists. Artists who each spring display their wares out of doors in old Washington Square, with paintings hung on the sides of buildings, on walls, and on fences, they create an open-air gallery, fascinating in its glowing color and endless variety. Not far from Washington Square is the city's oldest church, St. Mark's in the Bowery, dating from a day when little old New York was hardly more than a good-sized village. Today, many great churches and cathedrals mark the tremendous growth of the city. On busy Fifth Avenue, famed St. Patrick's Cathedral stretches its tall spires high into the blue sky that arch over Manhattan. But even this huge place of worship looks like a tiny toy model when viewed from high up in the towering skyscrapers of Radio City. Often called a city within a city, these great Radio City buildings shelter spots of charm and beauty. The many features include a unique outdoor skating rink, open from fall to spring. It's always fun for the skating enthusiast and for a big and appreciative gallery of visiting spectators. For a change in pace, try a drive through the park in the style of yesterday. Central Park has miles of scenic drives, wooded hills, and quiet lakes, right in the heart of the city. The Metropolitan Museum of Art is one of the best known of all the famous attractions that bring visitors to New York. The main public library has one of the largest and finest collections of research material in the world, a boon to the serious scholar. Almost as famous as the library itself are the big stone lions that guard the entrance. Uptown, another well-loved statue, Alma Mater, graces the portals of Low Memorial Library of Columbia University. Columbia is the oldest and largest of the many universities and colleges in New York State, which include such familiar names as Cornell, Colgate, Syracuse, and Rochester. In view of Columbia's campus rises the beautiful Gothic tower of Riverside Church. And just across Riverside Drive is the tomb of one of our national heroes, Ulysses S. Grant, 18th President of the United States. Far downtown at the tip of Manhattan is the spectacular man-made canyon of Lower Broadway, where many a living hero has been honored by the city's tumultuous welcome in his hour of triumph. At night, New York's great white way of yesteryear is no longer white. Broadway and Times Square sparkle with ever-changing lights that flash in every color of the rainbow. The Port of New York is our country's busiest, one of the great harbors of the world. 650 miles of waterfront with hundreds of piers serve more than 200 different steamship lines. Cargo ships arriving from every part of the globe steam past the Statue of Liberty, bringing their cargoes of foodstuffs, raw materials, and foreign products to the piers along the Hudson, or up East River, beneath the graceful span of Brooklyn Bridge. Outward bound go the products of our great manufacturing centers, everything from adding machines to automobiles, from light bulbs to locomotives. And of course, New York is a port of call for the greatest passenger liners of the world. For the motorist, fine drives and parkways in all the boroughs of New York City lead to and from vehicular tunnels beneath the rivers. And great bridges span the Hudson to New Jersey, Harlem River to the Bronx and Westchester Parkways, and East River to Brooklyn and Queens. Some of these tunnels and bridges lead into the system of parkways and highways that bring Long Island within easy reach of the motorist. The island provides nearby outdoor sports and recreation for millions of residents and visitors in the metropolitan area. A replica of the Campanile of Venice, this tower marks the best known of Long Island's 12 state parks. Once an almost inaccessible sandbar, Jones Beach is known today as the world's finest seaside playground. Landscaped and carefully tended grounds, beautiful buildings, miles of gleaming sand along the beach bring thousands of visitors daily during the pleasant months of the year, as many as 100,000 on a warm summer's day. Almost everyone enjoys a trip to the beach, and at this Long Island Riviera, there's room for all, and all are welcome. Surf fishing is popular, especially
after crossing the mountains, plains, and rivers of this great country. They were rewarded with a fine view of Manhattan and the metropolis of New York. Even Frances noted that although she'd seen it before, this towering city is always an inspiring sight from the air. Nowhere else are there so many buildings so tall and so closely packed together. Finally, they landed smoothly at Idlewild, the New York International Airport.
quelle que soit l'église de votre choix. De même que l'océan permit aux hommes de venir dans le Nouveau Monde, tout genre d'amusement pour tous les goûts, dans les nuits pleines de vie et d'enseignes brillantes, dans les journées pleines de profonde signification à notre présent. Vous commencez à connaître ce pays, à vous y sentir chez vous. Lorsque vous commencerez à vous apercevoir de la complexité de ce pays et de ses habitants, de leurs travaux et de leurs jeux, de leurs réalisations et de leurs besoins, de leur présent et de leur histoire, vous sentirez que vous commencez à les connaître. Et de même que, faisant la connaissance de quelqu'un, vous aimeriez en connaître davantage. Et dans New York que vous voyez, se côtoient des habitants de tous les pays, des croyants de toutes les religions. Irlandais, Suédois, protestants catholiques, Noirs, Italiens, Français, musulmans, Russes, Anglais, Israélites, Portoricains, Polonais, Allemands, Gallois, Chinois, Espagnols. Les gens de tous les pays qui l'ont bâti et lui donnent sa vie particulière. Un pays fait de beaucoup de pays réunis en un seul. Une visite dans un pays est une expérience nouvelle. On comprend mieux ce qui fut une fois étrange, on connaît des plaisirs différents et on acquiert un sentiment de parenté envers un peuple auparavant inconnu.
I'm Fran's brother Bill, a one-man reception committee. And there they are, fresh out of the clouds. The usual brother-sister bit with Fran, and a good close-up look at the girlfriend from the West. Very nice. The first thing we did was drive out home. Fran was anxious to see the family and to introduce Sally. And when I found out it was Sally's first trip to the big city, it didn't take long to figure out a plan for a tour of the town, taking in the highlights, including an item or two usually missed by most visitors. For a broadside look at the city, I decided on the 3-hour boat ride around Manhattan, an absolute must for anyone visiting New York. Here was a chance for Sally to see the famous waterfront, handling huge ocean liners, tugboats, and barges. As busy a stretch of waterway as you'll find anywhere in the world. That's one of the world's best known and most beloved landmarks, the Statue of Liberty. A gift to America from the people of France. It stands on a little island in the bay. We're now at the tip of Manhattan, the Battery, where the original Dutch settlers first landed. Here is Castle Clinton, the ancient fort that is now dwarfed by towering skyscrapers. Scenes at the Museum of the City of New York show early days. Now here is Stone Street in 1659. And South Street under the towering sails of the famous clipper ships. The ships that raced from China with a harvest of tea. In 1792, the city's business leaders met under a buttonwood tree to found the New York Stock Exchange. Today, the exchange at Wall and Broad Streets stands on almost the exact spot at the center of the busy financial district. Here, where the Sub-Treasury building now stands, is where George Washington was inaugurated as first President of the United States. At the head of Wall Street stands Trinity Church, the first Protestant Episcopal parish in New York. The church was given a large tract of land by Queen Anne and became the richest parish in the country. The churchyard, said to be worth $25 million in real estate value, is the burial place of Robert Fulton, Alexander Hamilton, and other famous figures in American history. We rounded the tip of Manhattan and headed up the East River, under the Brooklyn Bridge. Sally was impressed with the Manhattan skyline along the East Side Drive, given new importance by that famous international landmark, the United Nations building. This is the headquarters of the organization comprising some 75 nations devoted to world peace. Along First Avenue fly the flags of the member nations, with more added as new nations join. To this entrance come delegates of member nations from all over the world. When the General Assembly is in session, visitors crowd the galleries to see and hear the UN in action. Here we are inside the General Assembly, the most important meeting hall in the world today. We rounded the top of Manhattan Island and we're back again on the Hudson River, moving south under the George Washington Bridge. This mighty bridge spans the Hudson from Manhattan to New Jersey. This is the West Side Drive, one of the major routes carrying traffic from the bridge and the New York and New England parkways. Commuters and motorists form a never-ending stream into and out of the metropolis of Manhattan. That massive dome building is Grant's tomb, and nearby the beautiful Riverside Church. Today the girls visited the Midtown area. They walked up fashionable Park Avenue with its fine hotels and apartments. Modern glass-walled office buildings also line this famous street, the headquarters of some of America's greatest industries. 2 blocks away is fabulous Fifth Avenue. The girls were lucky to be there the day of a parade. Now, this is a mounted troupe of New York's finest. Along Fifth Avenue and on Lower Broadway is where heroes and visiting royalty are welcomed by the admiring city. As the bands play, the high school drill team does its rhythm dance in the street. Added enjoyment for New Yorker and visitor alike. Fifth Avenue is world-renowned as the shopping center of New York. It also has culture, great museums, and a public library. Now, this is the nation's largest municipal library, containing over 3.5 million volumes. The sidewalks along Fifth Avenue are always crowded with shoppers. Fran and Sally did some shopping, too. They were just window shopping here, though. Yes, this is the Tiffany's, the world-famous jewelry store. The girls really had themselves a field day. They visited practically every shop on both sides of Fifth Avenue. But I guess shopping is one of the chief attractions when visiting any city, particularly when that city happens to be New York. Here's an old friend from Greek mythology, Atlas, the strong man of the gods. Just as the book said, he's carrying the world on his shoulders. This is just one of the things that add character to the brick and stone of New York. Fran made sure that Sally saw Rockefeller Center, that city within a city. They strolled through the beautiful Channel Garden to the sunken plaza where a golden Prometheus looks over the outdoor restaurant. The flags of all nations add color to the scene. The restaurant was a good place to rest weary feet after their shopping tour. Sally was particularly impressed with what she called the delightful continental atmosphere. No, sir. San Remo was never like this. After lunch, there was no question as to what the next attraction was to be. Sally just had to go to the top of the famous RCA building for a bird's eye view of the city. This tremendous architectural masterpiece is actually a city within a city. Offices for thousands of workers, shops, theaters, radio and television studios. Name it, and it's here. "70 stories above the never-ending hustle of the city below, Sally and Fran were on the roof terrace, one of the city's most famous tourist attractions. One of the about the highlights of mighty Manhattan sprawling endlessly below. From the street, New York is one thing. From up here, well, Sally used one of the telescopes to get an even better look. From the Hudson River on the left, then north to Central Park, the patch of green country that has been maintained as a recreation area in spite of pressure from the city on all sides. To the east, the Queensboro Bridge spans the East River to Queens and Long Island. Fran had lived here all her life, but she had never seen this sight. I guess Sally was showing her New York. Along the East River, the United Nations and CHRYSLER buildings. Brooklyn is in the distance. With the guide explaining the highlights, they completed the full circle when they saw the Empire State Building, tallest on Earth, over 1,400 feet above the street. Directly across Fifth Avenue from Rockefeller Center is St. Patrick's. This beautiful Gothic cathedral, with its soaring spires, is one of more than 3,000 places of worship in New York. Uptown stands the Cathedral of St. John the Divine, the second largest church in the world. Only St. Peter's in Rome is larger. Another of the many varied religions in New York is represented by Temple Emmanuel, one of the most beautiful synagogues in the city.
Mother, it's all so busy. Seems almost like people here don't go to sleep. And big. There's so many things to see and to do. Seems more like a whole world than a city. Cultural? You mean like libraries and museums and stuff? Well, no, not yet. Culture is scheduled for a little later. Tomorrow I'm booked for fun. With Bill Gray, Fran's brother. We're starting over in Coney Island and working our way up toward Central Park. He's the most. Yes.
The next day, I took Sally to Coney Island. Coney is probably the best-known beach resort in the world. Oops. There's a surprise a minute at Coney Island. How we shot the works here. This first ride was like flying around on a giant roulette wheel. Just hang on to your girl and let her go. Sally loved it. I can't say that I was unhappy about it either. Now, next came the parachute jump. The chutes are hoisted to the top of a high tower and then gently float you back to Earth. Now, from a distance, it doesn't look particularly exciting, but just try it sometime. Coney Island has every fun gimmick you can imagine. giant Ferris wheel is one of the largest in the world. But the roller coaster is what really has you breathless. From the moment they first release the car to climb to the top of the steep incline. The higher you go up, the faster you come down. Sally got a real kick out of it. Wanted to take another ride. And me, I was ready for something more relaxing. Sally thought that was a real good idea, too. So before we knew it, we were at 59th Street and 5th Avenue. These horses and carriages, I think they call them Victorias, look a little incongruous on modern 5th Avenue, but that's just one of the things that makes New York the interesting place that it is. What a contrast. Right in the very heart of this bustling metropolis, you're out in the country, riding along the pleasant tree-shaded drives of Central Park. I showed Sally where I used to roller skate as a kid. And the fountain near the mall, where we used to sail our boats. Sally couldn't get over this change of pace right in the middle of the world's busiest city. New York changes, but kids and baseball, they'll always be the same. A little further along, a pleasant lake. Sally and I were going to rent a boat, but we decided to visit the zoo instead. New York really has several zoos. This one's in Central Park, and there's an even larger one in the Bronx. The apes and monkeys can always be counted on to act more human than people. And the polar bears just mope around waiting for the colder weather. Old Man Giraffe, the animal skyscraper, feels quite at home in this vertical city. He's always a big hit with zoo visitors. As are the lions in the Bronx Zoo. They enjoy an outdoor range without bars, just like the African veldt. There's a children's zoo, too, where the small fry can play around with domestic animals to their heart's content. On the 5th Avenue side of Central Park stands the Metropolitan Museum of Art, a treasury of some of the world's greatest masterpieces. The Met is also famous for its fine collections of armor, sculpture, historic costumes, and Egyptian antiquities. For those leaning more toward the modern in art, well, New York has that too. And the sculpture garden at the Museum of Modern Art is a good place to find some very interesting pieces. And some that are, well, controversial. We all agreed that we'd like to see a good show. So Sally and I took Fran to the famous Radio City Music Hall. Now, this is another superlative. The largest theater in the world. And the Rockettes put on a dancing performance unique in the world of the theater. When I mentioned baseball, Sally said sure, she'd just love to see one of those big league games. So before she could change her mind, we slipped up to the Yankee Stadium to see the Yanks take on one of their American League rivals. In the fall, King football takes over. At the stadium, the polo grounds, and on nearby college gridirons, you can see top-flight professional and college football every week during the season. Then we went to Belmont Park. I didn't have to explain the rules of this game to Sally. She had her form sheet out and had picked a winner before I could get to the ticket window. The horse I picked looked like this slow motion shot of a steeplechase race. In the winter, there's skating at the outdoor restaurant at Radio City. Or indoors, the winter sports fans flock to Madison Square Garden for some big league hockey, the fastest game in the world. This is real rough sport. Another popular sport is boxing. New York has put on more than its share of championship fights. Finally, I took Sally down to the bright lights of Times Square. Now, here is something you can see nowhere else on the earth. A million flashing lights in the center of the glamorous theatrical district. Here is a sign maker's art to the nth. We were out on the town, so we took in the entertainment for which New York is so famous. We dined and danced. Big brassy nightclubs, little side street spots, swing music and hot. New York has them all. Music in many tempos is the heartbeat of this city that never sleeps. Then the shortest month on record came to an end, and we all drove Sally to the airport for a flight back home.
Mexico, Air France's daily flight touches down in New York, giving passengers an opportunity to make a tour of this fascinating city. What should you see on a flying visit to New York? How the New Yorkers live, first of all. Let's begin with Wall Street, heart of the financial district, and Fifth Avenue thronged with shoppers. Had not set out to find a new sea route to India, when would America have been discovered? Rockefeller Center is impressive. From the top, you can see St. Patrick's Cathedral. From this height, it looks like a toy. You wind up your brief tour at Times Square, teeming center of New York life. A brightly colored taxi will drive you back to the airport. Goodbye, New York. We're on our... Only a few hours later, when the myriad lights of Times Square are going off, one by one, your Air France plane lands in Mexico City.
Even their birds came to live in skyscrapers. Their grass became rooftop. Been reached. Now we know that a frontier is more than space. We have a new mission, not in terms of geography, but in human situations. One out of 20 who have ever lived is alive today. In America, that means the frontier is 175 million souls. How do we reach them? How do we fulfill our mission on this new frontier? The most of us, it doesn't really matter what you believe, so long as you believe in something.
It was over the city that Christ wept. But it is true also, the kingdom of God is likened unto a city. In places like this, we must search for the kingdom. These are markers of our new front. They are without a sense of belonging. They crave fellowship, but they are alone. One symbol of our living is our mobility. About a third of us live between the cities, in suburbia. Some of us drive to work alone, some in carpools. Some of us travel by train. We rush from here to there and back again, but where are we going? Sometimes the do not survive the long ride to work. This is a tragedy of our new frontier. The Apostle Paul tells us, faith comes from what is heard. Today, mass communication makes it possible for one man to influence millions.